print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More intimate texts between John McRoberts and fraud investigation target. Read in court. Text messages reveal a sexual relationship between former Northern Territory Police Commissioner John McRoberts and a fraud target was continuing a month before her arrest, Darwin's Supreme Court has heard. Mr. McRoberts has admitted he had an affair with Alexandra Kamitsis, the former Darwin travel agent and Crime Stoppers NT chairwoman, but has pleaded not guilty to attempting to pervert the course of justice between May and November 2014. Kamitsis was the priority target for an investigation into 27 travel agents suspected of defrauding the NT Health Department's pensioner concession scheme. She was arrested in November 2014 and jailed the next year. At the end of the fifth week of the trial, prosecutor Michael McHugh used his closing address to read aloud messages sent between the pair, including on Mr. McRoberts' birthday in October 2014. On the day, Mr. McRoberts had been briefed on the investigation's progress by his then-deputy Mark Payne. "The news is not looking good at this stage for Mr. McRoberts," Mr. McHugh said. "Clearly the person that's always been at the top of the list of fraud targets is Ms. Kamitsis." Mr. McRoberts and Kamitsis exchanged messages, expressing sadness about not being able to meet. "Probably the most lonely and sad birthday I can remember, but shit happens," Mr. McRoberts said. "Your birthday is so important to me, I'm thinking of you. Adore you BBXXXXXX," Kamitsis replied. Mr. McRoberts also told Kamitsis in October that year to use Viber, because it was a safer way to communicate, Mr. McHugh said. According to the prosecution, Mr. McRoberts involved himself in the investigation for an improper purpose from May 2014, when he first raised the idea of sending civil debt notices to travel agents suspected of fraud ahead of criminal action. The prosecution alleged Mr. McRoberts then tried to frustrate the execution of a search warrant on Kamitsis in June 2014, took possession of the investigation file, and undermined the criminal investigation while promoting and developing his alternative civil strategy. Mr. McHugh told the jury the text messages strongly suggested a sexual relationship between the pair, which Mr. McRoberts wanted to hide in order to protect himself or Kamitsis. The jury was reminded that Fraud Squad boss Detective Sergeant Jason Blake opposed a plan discussed by an interagency task force, made up of police and departmental officers, to send letters of cooperation to travel agents, ahead of pursuing criminal action. "We don't often write to fraud offenders, or alleged fraud offenders, asking them to quantify what they have been doing," he told the court. "The strategy of asking them to tell us what they've stolen didn't seem illogical to me. You will always be my wingman." Examples of more than 5,000 text messages were read aloud, including an exchange from April 2014 when Mr. McRoberts texted Kamitsis, "Come over. I so wish I could. I don't have a car. I so want to make love to you." The transcript of her reply read, "Later that evening, Kamitsis said, I really thought you would be my lifelong BB, and a life member of my raft boat. You were invited over. You declined the invitation. Am I not?" Mr. McRoberts replied. A promise from Kamitsis in 2012 was also read aloud before the court. "You will always be my wingman." Some of these messages showed the pair's relationship extended to sharing gifts and confidential police information, Mr. McHugh said. "I hear Shane is going to be looked after," Kamitsis said in March 2014, referring to former Deputy Commissioner Shane Maines, who was removed from his position in early 2014. "Yes, he will be offered something. He's in negotiations now," Mr. McRoberts replied. McRoberts told assistant to book travel with Kamitsis' agency in another exchange in January 2014. Mr. McRoberts told his assistant Pauline Benaim to make sure his travel was booked through Latitude Travel, the agency Kamitsis owned. "I specifically told her to book through you. Let's see what happens," Mr. McRoberts said. In his closing submissions, Mr. McRoberts' lawyer told the jury everyone lies about sex. Everyone lies about sex, even the former President of the United States of America, maybe the current President of the United States of America, Mr. Elliott said. "You know sex makes things grubby." He said that when Mr. McRoberts told senior police Kamitsis was his friend in May 2014, they knew he had declared a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest cat is right out of the bag. he said. If Mr. McRoberts was having an affair, that might cause you to say the act was not especially moral. You might say hiding it has an aspect of immorality too, but we're not here to judge Mr. McRoberts' morals. He told the jury senior police, including Mr. McRoberts' then deputies Reese Kershaw and Mark Payne, made the decision to brief him on the investigation. They effectively put the monkey on his back, he said. Mr. Elliott will continue his closing address on Monday, when the trial resumes for